Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A.IdlePodcast, the podcast where I do weekly book reviews. This week, I read 9 by Zach Hines. Released in 2018 under HarperCollins, their Harper Teen Division, this is Zach Hines' debut as an author. It is a young adult science fiction novel about an alternate world where everyone is afforded 9 lives to live. There is an increasing amount of pressure for people to burn their lives in order to maintain the resources on the planet. Our main character, Julian, finds himself immersed in a worldwide conspiracy and tasked with solving the mounting moral issues around him, all while being a teen. There is a gnat in here flying around, so if I see it again, I'm going to try to kill it. Okay. So there wasn't much information I could find about Zach Hines. Really just, it was his bio that he has in the book. That's literally what I found when I Googled him. I did find his LinkedIn page though. But in a general sense, he has a journalist background. He has over a decade experience in the journalism world. And he is currently, in addition to being an author, he is a screenwriter who is currently with Amazon. So that's awesome. Now, when it comes to the premise of this book, there are a few things that you should know going into this review, as well as going into reading the book. So, this is an alternate Earth where humans have 9 lives after a series of intense storms that happened, and it created these lakes which afforded them the ability to come back to life, basically. Now, it's not like they have like let's say it was a given that you're going to live 100 years. It's not that they have 900 years to live. They just are able to come back to life 9 times. So if they, if they pass away or if they're killed, they're able to come back, and obtain that ultimate 9th life. So I would say essentially the average age of actually dying permanently is still the same. It's not explicitly stated in the book, but if you get up to that older age, probably what would happen is you would just pass away and then come back to life through the lake, and you would still be older, so you'd probably pass away and until you reach that 9th and final life, which is really kind of morbid in a sense. But now, humans are reborn via a lake that is usually located near their civilizations, and this lake, this special, powerful, magical lake, is, I guess, from the rains and the storms that happened. That's kind of generally described here, but it's implied that that's where, that water came from. And so what happens is if someone passes away, they are literally, the next thought is them coming to terms with the fact that they're in a new body and they're swimming through this lake, and they come back and, life goes on. Okay, and lastly, there are a few different death-related terms that you should know for this review. So when the characters talk about burn, that basically just means burn another life. It means essentially kind of, what's a good way to describe this? I guess die frivolously so that you can make it to the next level of lives. Your life score is the number of lives that someone has. So if, for example, if you have never died before, your life score would be 1. If you've died once before, your life score would be 2, and etc. So everyone can see exactly, where you are on the scale. Now, extinguishment is the legal term for it. That's what it's officially called, because they actually have an extinguishment schedule where you're supposed to go into these clinics and they actually kill you legally and then you come back to life. Permadead, it means exactly how it sounds, which is just permanent death. Retrogression is what happens. It's kind of like the effects of too many rebirths and too many deaths. Obviously, if you're going through that process, it's going to take a toll on you mentally. And so that's like, it's almost like a disease that affects the mind after you've gone through X amount of deaths and rebirths. And a retrograde is a person that is intensely affected by retrogression. So these people literally cannot remember who they were before. And they're essentially treated kind of like the homeless in this society. Okay, so we're going to touch on 4 characters today. The first being our protagonist, Julian Dex. Now, he is on his first life, and I'm going to give you the life score of all of our characters here. This is the life score of them at the beginning of the book, so I don't spoil anything for anyone. Now, this is very rare for someone to be on their first life score and be as far in age as Julian. Usually it's, the younger kids, but basically he's the only one in the entire high school. So it's very, very rare. Now, he's also, in addition to the protagonist, he plays the hero role because he has a lot to lose, and it seems that he's the only one that has the right motivation to, I guess, combat the system. His character traits are he's very strong, but he's also an independent thinker. He's someone who's able to think outside of the mob mentality that is associated with high school, but most importantly associated with the way of living and how they do things in terms of life scores and burning lives and things like that. He has his morals and he sticks to it. His motivation throughout the entire book is his baby brother, but also his need to know what exactly happened to his mother. So he has sort of a unique situation, and that's kind of what fueled his response and his reaction to this bigger conspiracy. Now, Nicholas is on his 5th life, so he's a number 5, which is kind of more of the norm for people in high school. He is a foil character because he opposes Julian in every way, and we're going to touch on his character traits, but he is a disruptive character for Julian because his whole outlandish personality. He's also the son of the director of the lake and that whole facility. He has a lot of power, and he intends to use that power to coerce Julian into burning his lives and kind of bringing him up to the level of most of his other peers. Nicholas has a lot of issues. Most importantly, he has daddy issues. So his father being this very important person within this society of like the council and the people that oversee the extinguishments and things like that, and the people that make the rules, he has a lot to live up to, and he has a really tough time living up to it. But on the other hand, he's also someone who is, whether you really like his character or not, he is a leader of influence. He's able to convince people or persuade people to think and act the way that he wants them to. A part of that is that he has the gift of gab. He is a very skilled storyteller, historian, speech giver, and that's really what rallies the whole burner society, and that's where the planning starts for them to, go out and burn all of their lives. So he is a good leader. He just never quite lives up to his father's map of what he wants him to be. And lastly, he is a nonconformist. And this is kind of in response to like how the government does things. The reason people like to burn their lives, and probably the main ones that do it are these kids in high school, is because they see it as kind of bowing down to society and the overall like government structure if they were to follow the extinguishment schedule and go into those clinics and die when other people tell them to. So that's why we have this group of kids that are in their own eyes taking control over all of their lives. So his motivation is mainly to defy society and make his father proud, but also he kind of is trying to maintain the authority over his lives, but that ultimately butts heads with authority overall. So that includes the authority within the high school, the authority in that town, everywhere. So he's trying to maintain this hold over himself, and I would say he probably does it quite well throughout the book, but he's not a very popular person with anyone else, truly. Okay, so Molly is a 2. She's on her second life. She really plays the role of kind of the sidekick here, the sidekick that switches sides. Um, she views herself as less than, and this kind of blossoms into her being this people pleaser to the burner society and kind of kissing up to them in an attempt to fit in, because she is somewhat of an outcast herself, because her along with Julian, they're in this school full of these very well-off kids and wealthy kids, and they don't come from wealth like that. So she is, I would say she's forced to switch sides and switch from the club of ones to this society of people that are purposely burning their lives. But her ultimate motivation is just success. She wants to be successful. What we find is that this whole life score thing is so ingrained in society that even to get into a good college, you have to be at least a 2. So it's like you're put at a really bad crossroads if you really believe that you just want to kind of, live your life naturally and not go out there and waste them. You don't really have a choice. And so her motivations are very sane, but she ends up kind of just going with the flow and being led into very terrible situations. And lastly, we have Cody, who I don't know if we ever really truly found out what her life score is, but she is also a foil character. She's an outcast, but she's like an extreme version because she's not even in the school with the rest of these kids. She is a part of the orphan kids that are in part due to a lot of their parents being retrogrades. So when you have these people that like burned their lives and gave up their lives so many times, whatever their motivation was, eventually they get to the point where they don't remember who they are. They get very irate, there's a lot of issues there, and they forget they literally have children. And so there's this society of kids that are just living out on their own and kind of living apart from society and the life score rules and all of that. And so she is a part of this group. She's also a disruptive character for Julian because, like Nicholas, she has a cause and she's all about, fighting for that cause that she holds near and dear to her heart. Whereas Julian is kind of just like, look, let me just live my life. I don't want to be involved in all nonsense. She's a very ambitious and perceptive person, but more than everything, she's very cautious. She's not trusting of the system, of new people, of situations, but she has that goal, and her motivation is mainly to uncover the conspiracy that she believes is happening. Now, speaking of conspiracy, that is the first theme I pulled. So essentially, there's this underlying feeling that the council, who is basically like the government in this world, they have a really shady involvement in the extinguishment process and the extinguishment schedules. So it's rumored that even though it's supposed to be a given that everyone has 9 lives, it's rumored that some people don't come back even if they're not on their ninth life. So let's say it's like a 4 or something, and they think, oh, I'm just going to burn another life for whatever reason, and they don't come back. There's a underlying current of conspiracy there, because people are like, okay, well, why should I then, what's the incentive to continue to burn my lives if I don't know if I'm going to come back or not? Because we're supposed to have this 9 guaranteed. But so there's some real sketchy stuff going on, obviously, and that it only makes sense because you have this situation which now is under strict government regulation. There is some conspiracy going on for sure, okay? Death is the second theme, obviously. So death is used as a tool of rebellion by the burners. They burn their lives how they want. They don't want to die in a facility. Death is used as a tool of control by the council, whether it's population control or just overall orderliness. But death is also used, well, it's not used, it's a misunderstood concept for a good portion, for the majority of this book, I'll say, because much about the side effects of burning lives and coming back and rebirth, they still don't know, even though it's implied that they've been living like this for at least 100 years. So there's still a lot that they're unaware of, and there's a lot of effects, and that's why things seem so sketchy, because they're not in complete control. And lastly, there's this theme of obligation. When it comes to moral obligation, the reasoning behind giving up one or more of your lives is supposedly for the good of society, because extinguishing lives is supposed to help maintain the amount of resources and help the human race thrive, with the thought process that if you have, the more lives you have, the longer everyone, like the world, has to sustain you in terms of food and whatnot, which, now that I'm talking through this, doesn't really make sense, because like I said earlier, it's not like they get to live for 900 years. That's not how it works, because once you get old in age, like, you'll just die and come back, die again until you get to your last life. So that doesn't really make any sense. But that's the whole moral obligation. There's a legal obligation because there are extinguishment schedules. So I think once you get to, like, I don't know, like, they didn't specify, but maybe once you get to 12, like, you have to go in and be extinguish one life, and then you get to 2, and then etc. So there is a schedule that they're supposed to be following. It's almost a rite of passage, but it's kind of like you have to do it in order to get ahead in life. For example, colleges don't accept ones. So it's like you got to give up one of your lives, which is crazy that it's that ingrained into society. But and then lastly, there's a financial obligation. So there are grants and rebates, money basically, that are used as an incentive to people to speed up their extinguishment schedules. So Julian had to make the tough decision to give up one of his lives because they were about to lose the house, and so they needed money to pay the mortgage. And so it's also a financial burden on a lot of these kids because they have to give up their lives to support their families. Overall, life scores determine the amount of wealth that one can obtain. So that's generally the consensus. Now that's all I have for themes. I had one more. Did I have something else? There was a thought I had. Oh, I guess this could kind of be like a motif, but again, it's implied that the world as a whole is low on resources. A lot of the food that the kids are given to eat at school or even just at the local diners, it's just like soy protein, and they dress it up, they fry it, whatever may have you. So it's implied that there's not a lot of meat going around, there's not a lot of animal products. So yeah, I guess that's a good reason for the kids to give up their lives, but it's still kind of sad. And also, there's a slight motif that Hines added into the book with cats. So cats had a strange presence in the book, and I guess it makes sense because, you know, cats have 9 lives and things like that. They didn't play as big of a role as I feel like they could have, but they're definitely a part of uncovering the conspiracy, which is really cool. But and as I speak of cats, Kitty Boo Boo is walking in and out of the room. She's ridiculous. I haven't seen her all day, but when I record, she wants to be up in the mix. Okay, so my review, I think this aesthetic is very much, you know, influenced by like the Hunger Games, Divergent, and Harry Potter, where it's like you have this completely different world that is ruled by different rules, and the children ultimately have to be the heroes. You know, we've seen this before. I do have one qualm with it though. So on the synopsis on the back of the book, it says that it's set in 1808, but there was one scene in the book where they implied that 1910 had already passed and was in the past. So I don't know if that was like an error, a writing error, or if that was like, since it's an alternate world, maybe they track years different. I don't know. But that bugged me throughout the book, but it is what it is. As far as what I thought if I would reread it, no. I think it's not for me. You know, I think that I possibly have outgrown the young adult genre just because I'm kind of like I've read this whole thing where it's like, oh, we're in a post-apocalyptic world, and the kids are growing up in this system that's not really fair, and so they rebel and they fix everything. Like, I've read it before. It's not a bad book. I just think that at this point in time, with the stuff that I'm reading normally, it doesn't really, you know, tickle my fancy. In fact, the main reason I continued to read it was because I did want to know like what the conspiracy was, but even that kind of fell a little flat for me. But it's a good book. It's a great YA book, and I think that if you're into the young adult genre, you'll really enjoy it. I will say though, if he does write a sequel, because he could, because there's a lot of unanswered questions, I'll definitely buy it, and I'll just, you know, work it into my reading schedule. But other than that, I mean, it's okay. Like, that's how I know I didn't really like it, because I don't really have an opinion on it. It's just kind of, it's mid, as the kids say. So, yeah, I don't really have a takeaway, unfortunately. It's a good book. Not for me, though. So, next week, hopefully by next week, I will have All the King's Men completely read and analyzed for you all. So, that's probably going to be the next episode by Robert Penn Warren. Other than that, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. Have a great weekend, and I will see you all next week. Thank you.